Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the downfall. To start this list off, let's talk about one of the things that happened just before the transition into the first intermediate period of ancient Egypt. It is important to note some of the causes of the fall of the Old Kingdom, which is what brought forth this period of chaos and turmoil. One reason that is often cited is the extremely long reign of Pepe II, who was the last pharaoh of the 6th dynasty. His reign began while he was a child, and it is believed that he lived to possibly into his 90s, which, like, first of all, that's incredible. Imagine that guy with modern medicine and plumbing. I'm just saying. But, of course, while that's wild to see that long of a reign, especially back in those times, his lengthy life proved to cause some issues for succession because the guy outlived all of his heirs. Because of this sort of disorganization, it led to the regime of the Old Kingdom kind of being disintegrated. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Nile. The overflowing of the Nile was a very important time for ancient Egyptians. It is a super important cycle for them that was actually celebrated annually for 2 weeks. In the intermediate period, it is thought that the overflowing of the Nile, which really was necessary to their way of life, was lessened, or it may have potentially been non-existent for a period due to a drier climate, which is said to have potentially led ancient Egypt and its citizens into a terrible famine. The drier climate and the lack of the Nile inundation would have resulted in lower crop yields, which would have a significant impact on those living in the area at the time. In our number 8 spot today, we have disorganization. Like I kind of mentioned in the first point, part of the reason this intermediate period is often referred to as the Dark Ages is due to the lack of organization within the kingdom. Manetho, who is a historian and priest from the Ptolemaic era, would describe 70 kings who ruled in 70 days. This is likely a bit sarcastic and an exaggeration, but it's meant to show how chaotic things were at the time in terms of leadership. This period of time can sometimes be overlooked in terms of leadership because there is very little known about who was actually leading during this time. It is possible that the 7th dynasty may have been more of an oligarchy, which would have likely been composed of officials of the 6th dynasty. There unfortunately is very little in terms of both textual as well as architectural evidence that survived this period, so much of what really went on remains a secret. In our number 7 spot today, we have artifacts. During the time of the 7th and 8th dynasty, while it is true that we have little to go on, there have been a few interesting artifacts found that are believed to belong to this time period. There have been scarabs that have been found that are believed to have belonged to Neferkare II of the 7th dynasty. There was also a green jasper cylinder that is believed to have come from the 8th dynasty. There was even a small pyramid that was constructed by King Ebi of the 8th dynasty that has been identified at Saqqara. While we have found these things, there are some rulers from this time whose positions remain unknown to this day. It is entirely possible that we may never know where some of these rulers lie. In our number 6 spot today, we have literature. While this entire period of time is incredibly interesting, one super cool thing is that the emergence of what is considered literature by our more modern standards seems to have occurred during this period of time. This led to the birth of new literary prowess in the Middle Kingdom, the age that came after this period. There is one specific piece that is very important historically, and that is the Ipuwer Papyrus. Although this piece of literature is not dated to this period, it is widely believed that it is likely referring to this intermediate period, and it records the decline in both international relations as well as just the general impoverishment that was seen in ancient Egypt at the time. In our number 5 spot today, we have nomarchs. Another problem that really contributed to the fall of the Old Kingdom and the introduction into this more difficult period of time was the rise in power of provincial nomarchs. A nomarch was a provincial governor in ancient Egypt. Since the country was divided into 42 different provinces, which were called nomes, there would be a government official that was responsible for each one. Nearing the beginning of the first intermediate period, the position of nomarch had become a hereditary one, which of course meant that one family was likely to hold the position and the power for quite some time. This of course meant that these families, with every year, would only get more powerful and more influential within their nome, which left them becoming more independent from their overall ruler. CELLAR. These nomarchs were beginning to have their own tombs built, and they began putting together their own armies, and of course, this went on to create conflict with those surrounding them. This not only created tensions, but it created warfare. In our number 4 spot today, we have division. Once things kind of settled from the chaos of the fall of the Old Kingdom and the bizarrities of the 7th and 8th dynasties, it was realized that Egypt was now kind of divided when it came to ruling, as there were 2 competing power bases. One of those bases was at Heracleopolis, which was located in Lower Egypt, and the other was at Thebes in Upper Egypt. Those in Lower Egypt had their rule for approximately 94 years, and their kings comprised the 9th and 10th dynasties, each with 19 rulers. The founder of the 9th dynasty, Kheti I, is often described as quite an evil and violent ruler who caused a lot of harm to those living in Egypt at the time. It is said that he was, quote, seized with madness, which I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it is likely hinting towards some sort of mental health issue. In the end, it is said that he met his demise at the hands of a crocodile, which, I mean, leaves me with a lot of questions.
Number 3. Drum Castle. Ancient chambers, okay, let's do this. Now we're talking about some real ancient stuff. That stuff was just fun, I wanted to throw in the list. But now this is definitely ancient. Back in 2013, while a conservation team was working on Scotland's oldest castle, Drum Castle, they found a previously undiscovered part of the castle, which was like this small hidden chamber. It was left untouched for hundreds of years. Dr. Jonathan Clark from FAS Heritage, part of the archaeological team, recalls window openings on the first floor level, but once inside the castle, wherever these rooms were, they were hidden behind bookshelves. They couldn't get in. So they unblocked the windows from the outside, took a peek in, and then found this. They found a hidden medieval chamber in great condition. Even had a little toilet in there too. To quote Dr. Clark himself from The Scotsman, great name for a website also, gotta add that in. He says, "This adds greatly to our knowledge of how the interior of the Tower of Drum was used in the medieval period. In due course, it should contribute a greater knowledge of how 14th century towers were used in their heyday." And no, in case you were wondering, nobody had breakdance battles in this one. I already looked into that. Number 2, Paris Catacombs. Originally, the tunnels under Paris Catacombs were built for stone mines, but near the end of the 18th century, it turned into something a little haunting, I'd say. Cemeteries were starting to fill up. Literally, they were filling up at this point in time. Humans didn't figure out how to be clean and where to store bodies and all that jazz. So bodies would just be laying at the side of the road, and they would literally pile up. So the solution was to, put them out of sight, out of mind, and to now use these catacombs. These tunnels have been there for centuries, so you might as well put them to good use. And by good use, I mean, let's pile a bunch of skeletons on top of each other. But in 2004, French police discovered something not terrifying, which is lovely. They found a small movie theater hidden underneath the city in the catacombs, and a tiny restaurant as well, in case you got a little snacky. 7 years later, a leader of UX, Urban Experiences, came forward and said there were over 100 people working on this, and it was supposed to be this new underground experience. I don't know, I'm kind of torn on this one. Would you watch a movie in the Paris Catacombs? Imagine watching As Above, So Below in a theater in the Paris Catacombs. Could you do it? I don't know, I feel sick thinking about that. And finally, number 1, Niagara Falls. I'm lucky enough to be a short drive from Niagara Falls. Of course, at this point in my life, it's not too exciting to go anymore. I've done the wax museums, I've mini putt with the dinosaurs. I've seen it, I've done it. What else? Well, how about the Cave of Evil Spirits? Yeah, that ought to mix it up. You can leave your poncho behind for this excursion as well, because the Cave of Evil Spirits is near the Devil's Hole, which is far away from the actual falls. On the US side, right on the side of the river. It's this limestone cave, maybe just 42 feet deep, and it was named by early settlers to get anybody from poking around inside. But come 1679, La Salle, on his return to Lake Ontario, passed this cave, and his guide even discouraged him to go in, but La Salle entered anyways. And within 2 years, death followed. It wasn't like a haunting or ghost or anything. I wouldn't call this a haunted cave per se. I think this is just what tends to happen when you walk into somebody's home unannounced in the late 1600s. Yeah, you piss a few people off. Kicking off the list at number 10, the Eiffel Tower apartment. I live on the 11th floor in a building, and let me tell you, it's way too high up. I'm not a fan of heights at all. I can't do them. My legs get all shaky. I start going, ooh, maybe it's because I'm tall already. I don't know, not a fan. But this first one here gave me a hard time researching. Above the Eiffel Tower, above the main observation deck when it was completed back in 1889, Gustave Eiffel, like Mr. Eiffel, the dude who made the blueprints, included for himself a sweet little condo at the very, very top. This 100 square meter room sounds spacey at first, but in reality it's full of gear and the elevator shaft. It was like Harry Potter's closet in comparison to the rest of the house. You know what I mean? Not too lovely. This room did have a kitchen, a small one. It also had a bathroom, thank God, and a living room. God forbid you open a window though. Papers must have been all over the place. Gustave's hair must have been so messy all the time. But pretty interesting nonetheless. Number 9, the Washington Monument. This is one of those things, again, where I wish I get to check out myself, but again, the fear of heights, there's no way I could physically do this. You can go inside the Washington Monument, that's no surprise, we all know this at this point. But did you know there's a secret hiding spot at the very, very top? A secret hatch. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Peter has to save his classmates. They're stuck in the elevator shaft in the monument. In order to reach them before they fall, he has to kick through the window at the very top of the monument. It's a pretty intense scene. He almost doesn't make it. It takes him like 3 super Spidey kicks just to get in. Turns out he could have just crawled 4 feet a little higher to the very top of the monument and opened this secret hatch. Could have called it a day without using web fluid. Easy peasy. Yeah, you don't need Spider-Man to clean and maintain the monument. Just people who aren't afraid of heights, apparently. Number 8, Trafalgar Square. Come on down to Trafalgar Square. We got tiny police stations. Little Brits. Back in 1926, strikes and protests were every other week. It's almost like, you know, increasing labor and 13% wage cut is a bad thing. Odd, who knew? So workers in every industry at this point all went on strike. They stopped working in London for 9 days, and most of these protests would happen in London's Trafalgar Square. So in order to keep an eye on things without, you know, looking like you're keeping an eye on things in 1926, you know, the classic walking around, smacking a bat in your hands, blowing smoke in kids' faces, the they do in Peaky Blinders. That's, you know, you can't do that. So instead, the police built a tiny secret covert police station in one of those large light posts. Imagine if your dog started peeing on one of these posts and then all of a sudden 15 police officers just ran out. I'd be confused for the rest of my life. Number 7, the Brooklyn Bridge wine cellar. I'm not a wine guy by any means, but I respect sommeliers. Like, they have books of knowledge about wine just stored in their cool heads at all times. And they look cool while they're doing their job. They know everything about grapes and they look cool. Didn't know that person could exist. What a dream job. Wine is a lifestyle to many. So if you live in New York City and you're a big fan of Merlot, listen up. The Brooklyn Bridge connects Manhattan and Brooklyn. It was built back in 1883, and at the time, it was the longest bridge in the world until 1903. Chief Bridge Engineer John A. Roebling, as well as his son, Washington Roebling, worked into the building plans in order to help the city financially after, you know, just spending $15 million on a bridge. They included 2 wine cellars, one on each shore, as well as other chambers that could be rented out. The plan worked, and over the following 40 years, wine was stored in the dark, cool granite cellars. Probably so many spiders down there. That's all I think of when I see old just spiders. I see a barn now on TV, I'm like, ugh. It's too many spiders, can't do it. Number 6, Mount Rushmore. When sculptor Gutzon Borglum carefully planned out his designs for Mount Rushmore, the iconic American landmark in South Dakota, he included a hidden room. The room's purpose was ideally to be a time capsule in a titanium vault full of records telling the story of Mount Rushmore's construction, so it doesn't get lost thousands of years down the line in the future. Although I think, I don't know, carving presidents' faces into the sacred land of natives was enough, but sure, vaults work just as well. The Hall of Records was meant to be this, well, like I said, massive hall with an 800-foot staircase, bronze walls, a massive bronze eagle, swear to God, just a massive eagle. Sure, just because. He wanted future generations to look at this place in awe as we do with Stonehenge. So work began July 1938, but after a year, the project was put on pause to, you know, maybe focus on the presidents and then carving them first before we work on the secret room, national treasure looking ass. Borglum passed in 1941, so the 70-foot cave that was completed at this point was now the vault. They had to be done, that's it. Not as big or flashy as he wanted, but still, there is now a titanium vault behind the 1,200-pound slab of granite. Number 5, Supreme Court basketball court. A court in a court. This is now Inception. Didn't know that. This is the Supreme Court I'm talking about, mainly referred to as the highest court in the land. Back in the 40s, this was the storage room initially for the courthouse, but over time it turned into a workout room, being so large and all. I wouldn't even call that a storage room in the first place, really. But courthouse employees would go in there often and work out, and eventually some genius threw up a couple of backboards. So yes, there's now a basketball court above the Supreme Court. That is insane to me. Imagine hearing players' shoes squeaking around during a trial. You're like, Your Honor, I believe somebody just got juked. Number 4. Grand Central Station tennis court. Okay, it's kind of hard to mention the Supreme Court without talking about the tennis courts at Grand Central. In the early 1800s, trade and banking fueled the city, specifically via railroad. Both freight and passenger, I mean, this was booming. So come 1871, Grand Central opens up, but the Vanderbilt Tennis Club, that opened up much later in 1965. It wasn't even tennis either. This room had also been a recording studio at one point in history. It had also been an art gallery. It hosted breakdancing, like a whole breakdancing tournament, boxing, double Dutch tournaments, pretty much everything you want to see, they've hosted here at one point. So if you ever see a sweaty dude walk out of a janitor's closet with a bunch of tennis balls, go poke around a bit. go poke around a bit.
In our number 3 spot today we have the moon rabbit. The moon rabbit comes from Chinese folklore and is usually depicted while holding a mortar and pestle to mix up the elixir of immortality. In the lore, the moon rabbit is the companion of a goddess who lives on the moon. In some stories she is a mortal human, and in others she is an outcast deity who consumed too much of the elixir of immortality and floated up to the moon. There are some stories, however, that claim that she consumed too much of the elixir on purpose to float up to the moon to get away from her husband. Either way, it's clear she had too much, but floating up to the moon sounds like kind of a fun time. In our number 2 spot today we have the Fountain of Youth. The Fountain of Youth has been written about for thousands of years. It is said to be a spring that allegedly restores the youth of anyone who is lucky enough to bathe in or drink the waters. There are so many stories of the mythical Fountain of Youth, it has led many explorers and adventurers to set out in search of it. This legend really gained a lot of notoriety in the 16th century when it became associated with the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who was the first governor of Puerto Rico. It is said that while he was searching for the Fountain of Youth, he actually found Florida in 1513, which I gotta admit, probably isn't the same at all. Legend goes that at the time he was in Florida, the indigenous people told him that he could find the Fountain of Youth in Bimini. In our number 1 spot today we have the Benjamin Button jellyfish. Well, it seemed fitting to end off today's list with one that's a little bit more recent, and this discovery may be the real, actual key to immortality. This jellyfish was first discovered in 1883, but its superpower wasn't actually realized until the 1990s. What makes this jelly so special is that it has the ability to transform its adult self back into a baby, and it can't only do this just once, it can do it over and over again. To be totally honest, a lot of these jellies do die in the good old-fashioned way, but when in an emergency situation such as starvation or physical damage or something along those lines, instead of quickly meeting death, these jellies can transform all of their existing cells into a younger state. The jellyfish will turn itself into a blob-like state, and then it will develop into a polyp colony, which is essentially the first stage in the life of a jellyfish. Researchers are of course looking into how this is possible for the jelly, as well as trying to find out how this could be used to help humans as well. Maybe the key to immortality has really just been swimming around in the ocean this whole time.
Kicking off the list at number 10, ancient exercise. Athletic gear today is amazing. We have shoes that correct your stride while you're running. We have backpacks filled with water. We have clothing now designed to keep you cool. How does it even, what? It's quite impressive stuff, but just how did ancient civilizations do it? What did we do before New Balance opened? You know what I mean? Well, ancient Greeks, believe it or not, used to work out naked. Completely naked, just butt nude. The word gymnasium actually translates to the Greek term gymnasion, which meant school for naked exercise. That sounds like a pretty insane school. Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, or Ezekiel's school for naked exercise? How do we pick? Naked exercise? That's the worst place to see naked people, in my humble opinion. Should I go to the squat rack? No, maybe not. I don't know. Hey man, do you mind spotting me? Actually, never mind. I'm actually good, thanks.
In our number 9 spot today we have Amrita. There's a collection of Vedic hymns called the Rig Veda, and according to these Hindu hymns, Amrita, which is sometimes called soma, is a drink that can give someone immortality. Rig Veda 8:48-3 says, "We have drunk soma and become immortal. We have attained the light, the gods discovered. Now what may foeman's malice do harm to us? What, O immortal, mortal man's deception?" While Amrita and its consumption by humans has been well documented throughout history, the knowledge of where to get it has been lost. It is believed to have been some sort of plant or fungus, and the instructions for the preparation of it involved things like pounding parts of the plant into a paste or to release its juices. It would then sometimes be filtered through wool and then mixed with cow's milk before being consumed. Amrita was often said to have been found in mountainous regions, but despite there being such detailed accounts of its use, the true identity of it has been lost, and now sometimes ritual prayers will include an apology to the gods for the lack of Amrita. In our number 8 spot today we have Ambrosia. This is sometimes known as the nectar of the gods and is often referred to in ancient Greek mythology. It is unclear if ambrosia and nectar were originally separately distinguished, but as of now it is commonly accepted that nectar is usually the drink form, with ambrosia being the food form, but regardless, this is the food and drink of the gods. Apparently nectar can be translated to death overcoming, and that makes a lot of sense. In mythology, this drink is usually said to have brought longevity or immortality to whoever consumed it. It was brought to the gods in Olympus Olympus by doves, and it was served by either Hebe or Ganymede at the heavenly feast. The consumption of ambrosia was usually reserved for divine beings and can be seen in stories like when Heracles is given ambrosia by Athena upon his transition into immortality. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh. The first known instance of the search for immortality is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In it, Gilgamesh fears the fragility of life after the death of his companion Enkidu. Because of this, he seeks out Unapushtim. This guy is a similar figure to Noah in Mesopotamian mythology, who was a servant of the great alchemist of the rain who ended up later becoming immortal. So Gilgamesh is searching this guy out to seek the answers to immortality, and when he finds him, he tells him to abandon his search for immortality, but he also gives him a trial to defy sleep if he truly wishes to be immortal. Spoiler alert, Gilgamesh fails the trial. After this, the guy tells him about a plant that can make him young again. This plant is located at the bottom of the sea, and Gilgamesh does end up obtaining it, but it is soon stolen by a serpent. I guess using this story as reference, it would appear as though there's some sort of trial that can grant immortality, but when all else fails, there might just be some sort of plant at the bottom of the sea that will do the trick. Just gotta watch out for those sneaky snakes. In our number 6 spot today, we have metal. Metals are pretty strong usually, and some seem to be even indestructible, so it would totally make sense that there was once a train of thought where if a human consumed these metals, they too would take on the properties of being strong and indestructible, right? Flawed logic aside, this really once used to be the way of thinking. Mercury was a metal that was astounding to alchemists. A metal that is in liquid at room temperature? While that might have been super cool at the time, the poisonings that were about to happen in the name of immortality certainly were not. The Roman god Mercury is the equivalent to the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian deity Thoth. All of these figures are said to have consumed liquid gold or white drops in order to achieve immortality, and it's these stories that caused ancient and medieval alchemists to believe that if they could either find a way to suspend gold in liquid form or mix gold and mercury together, then they would have found the recipe to immortality. In our number 5 spot today, we have Nicolas Flamel. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you've definitely heard this name before, but did you know that the character is actually based off of a real person? Nicolas Flamel lived from 1330 to 1418, and he was a successful French bookseller. What's curious, however, is that about 200 years after his death, there began to be texts that surfaced that were attributed to him. According to these texts, Nicolas had learned the secrets of alchemy from Jewish alchemists while traveling in Spain, and it is said that during this time he acquired the original copy of the Book of Abramelin the Mage. It was then claimed that Nicolas was the one who held the elixir of life as well as the secrets of transmutation, and it was also claimed that he was probably still alive somewhere. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Philosopher's Stone. While we're on the topic, we might as well talk about another story from history that relates to the infamous stone. There is a legend that suggests that the stone is located in a creek in Philadelphia. In the 17th century, a group called the Society of Women in the Wilderness settled in the woods outside of the Germantown section of Philadelphia. This group was led by an occultist named Johannes Kelpius, and he believed that the world was going to end in 1694. The group spent most of their time in caves and peaceful meditation, just living their best lives, and you might be sitting there wondering why I'm talking about this. Rumor has it that Johannes actually had the Philosopher's Stone, as he was its guardian, and he kept it hidden inside of his meditation cave. It is said that before he passed away, he explained the secrets of the stone and instructed the women of the group to toss the stone into the nearby creek after he passed, to which they obliged. Today, this meditation cave is still accessible, and it is now marked as a historic site. In our number 3 spot today, we have the buffer zone. Within the Heracleopolitan Kingdom, there was a powerful and wealthy province of Siut, or Asiut, which really rose to prominence during this otherwise difficult time. A new line of nomarchs began to rise out of this area, and they maintained quite a close relationship with the kings of Lower Egypt. We were able to discover this through what was inscribed on their tombs. These inscriptions provided a look into what the political situations were like during their reigns, and it describes this line of nomarchs as digging canals, reducing taxation, reaping rich harvests, raising cattle herds, and maintaining an army and fleet. Again, we are talking talking about a time that is referred to as the Dark Ages, so this sort of success was a big deal. Despite this thriving political situation, the Siut province acted as a sort of buffer zone between the dueling Upper and Lower Egypt, which means that it also bore a lot of the brunt of the attacks that were coming down to Lower Egypt from Thebes. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Upper Egypt rulers. We spoke briefly about those who were ruling Lower Egypt at the time, so what about Upper Egypt? Well, the Theban kings are said to have been descendants of Intef, who is the nomarch of Thebes, often referred to as the keeper of the door to the south. Intef is often credited with organizing Upper Egypt into the independent ruling body from the south that it went on to become, but despite this, it doesn't appear as though he ever tried to claim the title of king himself. Intef II began the attack of northern Egypt, and his successor Intef III completed that attack, which then left him to begin the move into Middle Egypt and the attack on Lower Egypt. The first 3 kings of the 11th dynasty, all named Intef, would also become the last 3 kings of the first intermediate period. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Middle Kingdom. With all of the political chaos that was going on and with the competition for power, this resulted in a lot of violence. Prior to the military conflict, it is said that temples were pillaged, artwork was vandalized, and statues of different kings were destroyed. After the reign of the Intefs, they were succeeded by a line of kings who were called Mentuhotep. The second in this line is the ruler who would go on to eventually defeat the kings and rulers of Lower Egypt, those in the Heracleopolitan kingdom. This is important because it marked a new shift in ancient Egypt. This defeat marked the unification of the country, the continuation of the 11th dynasty, and it brought Egypt into the time of the Middle Kingdom.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Ancient hockey. Being a Canadian and all, I had to kick this list off with this one. This one kind of hurt my soul, I'm not gonna lie. We found out that hockey wasn't our thing during Canada's 150 celebration. How epic is that? Great timing, that's amazing. I'm cold a lot of the time living in Canada. My face hurts when I walk to the store and get my weird bagged milk, then I return back to my igloo. I'm cold all the time, right? That's the idea, that Canadians are cold, they play hockey, and they live in igloos. Well, pretty much, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Hockey isn't just our favorite winter activity, turns out Vikings loved it as well. Vikings actually brought it here in the first place, believe it or not. They didn't even call it hockey too, they called it a way better name. They called it slap fatten, which means to slap the fat around. How amazing is that? Me and the boys are gonna go play some road slap and fatten. Taylor, what happened to your knee? Oh, I got a slap and fatten road ration. Yeah, I wasn't careful enough playing slap and fatten. I got checked. Vikings would get sticks and try and slap some fat in between 2 posts of some way, shape, or form. Imagine getting cross-checked by a Viking. See you later, chest plate. Bye. To the penalty box you go, Bjorg, or whatever your name is. Number 9, Egyptian tomb curses. The walls of Egyptian tombs are fascinating. The paintings, or sometimes carvings, were meant to create a peaceful afterlife for those who had passed on. Pharaohs were buried with their treasure, favorite foods, everything wealthy that they owned. They believed they could take all of that with them to the afterlife. This belief, of course, welcomed grave robbers, so in order to prevent any Nicolas Cage national treasure hunters to come snooping by with their flashlights, many of these tombs had curses written on the walls. This one is warning trespassers that gods will wring their neck like that of a goose. Also, if I walked into somebody's property nowadays and it said trespassers' necks will be wrung out like a goose, I would leave. I would turn around immediately. You don't have to be an ancient Egyptian god to get that message across. I'm good. Also, buried in Mastaba, inside the found tomb of Ankh-Mahor, a pharaoh official from 4,000 years ago, a curse was written. Might do against this, my tomb, the same shall be done to your property. It also warns of Ankh-Mahor's knowledge of secret spells and magic, and threatens to fill impure intruders with a fear of seeing ghosts. Again, there's that, or there's beware of dog. Number 8. Dung beetles. Ah yes, dung beetles, the poop beetles, also known as scarabs. They're the only species in the entire world that instinctively follow the Milky Way. They just know to follow the Milky Way. How insane is that? You know how some animals just know to do things, like sea turtles, when they're hatched, they immediately sprint to the ocean to avoid, being plucked by giant seabirds. They know to go towards the sea naturally. These beetles would naturally follow the line of the Milky Way, and they would at the same time roll their poop towards it for some reason. First species in the animal kingdom to do this. So are dung beetles trying to phone home? Why does their planet need so much poop? Why are they rolling it towards the cosmos? Does Thor need this? Does Odin need all this? Symbols of these beetles are seen either in hieroglyphics in Egypt, but also near the sacred lake at the Temple of Karnak, there's a massive dung beetle monument, a poo-poo bug monument. Look at this thing, it's beautiful. There's even a legend still to this day behind the statue that if you walk around it 9 times, you would find health, wealth, and love. The scarab is there to represent the god Khepri, which at the time, Egyptians believed was the sun. I grew up thinking the sun was a baby. Thanks, Teletubbies. Number 7. Weak wine. When we think of ancient Greeks, we think of wine and parties and apparently naked exercise, right? But was it really a drunken festival of love all the time? Did they rock and roll all night and party every day? Ancient Greeks rarely drank wine without diluting the hell out of it first. The water to wine ratio was something like 4 to 1. 4 to 1! That's insane. That's basically just water. That's crystal light you're drinking. I guess it's a good thing because you don't have to worry about waking up at 4 a.m. dehydrated. The ancient Greeks believed that drinking undiluted wine could cause blindness or insanity. Again, I think that's just called being drunk and maybe blacking out. I don't know. The 4th century poet Amphis had your back though. The best way to cure those ancient hangovers, according to thee, was to boil cabbage. And in order to keep the party going without embarrassing yourself after drinking too much sparkling Merlot, the key apparently was to bake and eat a pig's lung. That's the trick to never getting drunk. Again, I think that's just food that helped here in this situation. Either way, if you're gonna drink, do so responsibly. Number 6. Greek statues. We've all done it at one point, okay? You're at a museum, you see the statue in front of you. It's massive. The dude has like 16 abs, he's made of bronze, he's 12 feet tall. The amount of detail gone into their body and all those muscles, it's jaw-dropping to say the least. Their fingernails, their dimples, muscles everywhere. But did you know ancient Greeks would make statues, they would make that small on purpose. Men who were, well endowed were more often than not fools. They only ruled for lust. If you had a big brain, however, oh, buddy, you were the talk of the town. They would whisper in the wind as you pass by. I heard Alexander has a massive brain. Have you seen his brain? Whenever an actor would play a fool on stage, they would be given a comedically large setup. That's how you know he's the fool/villain. The way we see these statues today of these ancient rulers, it meant that they had self-control and intelligence. This whole time I thought they were just in a cold room, but you know what? That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help. Hit that like button. I'm here to historically help you on your statue knowledge. Number 5. 2020 mummies. Yeah, as if 2020 wasn't stressful enough, here's some more. Turns out we also found a lot of mummies. I'm glad Brendan Fraser's returning to Hollywood because it sounds like we might need him to suit up again real soon. I don't know. Back in 2020, while we were stuck inside watching Netflix, more than 100 sealed coffins were found in Egypt. These findings date back to 712 BC, which was a period where Egypt was controlled by foreign civilizations like Persians and ancient Greeks. These coffins were still occupied, still untouched, and hidden for thousands of years. The discovery has confirmed that Saqqara was the main burial site of the 26th dynasty, including the first known burial pyramid. That's a scary pyramid. Number 4. Colosseum hecklers. When the Colosseum was built in 80 AD, about 50 to 80,000 fans of Roman sport would just pour in. The energy here was high. This was their only source of entertainment. They didn't have DVDs or anything like that. So some fans would get so into the action that they would heckle gladiators. Well, just like a comedy show, when you heckle, they too can hear you. You're throwing off their entire game, and that's a no-go. It's gonna have to stop. Other people are also here trying to enjoy the same show. Today, a 19-year-old usher will ask you to keep it down a few times before kicking you out. But in Roman Colosseum days, buddy, you didn't get a warning. One of Rome's more violent emperors, Domitian, he was a die-hard fan when it came to the Colosseum and its games. So much so that one guy in the crowd heckled a gladiator one day, and the emperor had him pulled from the audience and then thrown into the center of the arena. And also, no, he did not leave that arena that day. Hey Maximus, smile! Me? Number 3. Crappy jobs. The groom of the stool was perhaps one of the worst jobs to have in the Middle Ages, but it's one of the most important. The groom of the king's close stool was a position created during King Henry VIII's reign. Their job was to wipe the king's behind. Yeah, and if that doesn't sound horrible enough, this poor lad would also have to carry around the king's stool with him on his back, like a backpack, like he's going to school with a big backpack full of poop. He would also have to monitor the king's meal times, and they would also plan their day around when they thought the king was going to experience a bowel movement. They were just gonna have to wait around until it happens. If I were the king, I would be so anxious if a little dude just started hanging out near me. He's like, hey boss, you feeling all right? You good? A little full? A lot of bread you ate there, eh? Why don't you take a 5? Trust me. Trust me. This job was an honor to have. Sons of noblemen were awarded this role. You would get pretty close to the king, I mean, obviously, but as time went on, these grooms o' stools became secretaries to the king, eventually getting a higher pay and benefits. Number 2. Vatican's secret archives. The archives are 53 miles long. There's around 35,000 volumes of catalog in them, and the Vatican's secret archives are honestly no joke. They're very real, but in order to see them for yourself, it's gonna take some time. Those indexes are not public, hence why I included it in this top secret video. You're welcome. Only scholars can access them after they're 75 years old. Their official purpose is to house official paperwork, and of course, it's a treasure trove of anything and everything related to the Pope. It's also full of ancient documents, because, I mean, where else do you safely store a letter from Mary Queen of Scots, for example? Yeah, Mary Queen of Scots was killed after serving roughly 20 years in custody, but eventually she was sentenced to death for conspiring to kill Queen Elizabeth I. Before she met her fate, however, she wrote a letter to Pope Sixtus V, literally begging for her life. But evidently, the Pope did not intervene, and on February 8th, 1587, Mary Queen of Scots was executed. You know, letters like that. For example, I've played too much Assassin's Creed, I think, in my life. Vatican letters? I'm on my way, Ezio. Let's do this. Number 1, the less armor, the better. It's 70 AD, it's ancient Roman times, you're walking into the Colosseum, you're feeling hyped, right? You're eyeing down that 8'6" monster in front of you, his name's Gore or something terrifying. If you had to battle these guys, you would want a weapon of some sort. A Nerf bat, give me, like, I don't care, literally anything. Weapons in the Colosseum were a necessity, but did you know some gladiators would use nets to fight? Nets, like they're catching butterflies. This class was referred to as the Rhetari. Their combat style was built around the ways of fishermen, hence the nets. Yeah, Popeye versus Maximus. Place your bets, guys. Who's gonna get it? Popeye would for sure f him up. More often than not, these gladiators would use nets and a trident. How cool is that? They would take their time too. They also wouldn't wear any armor. They try and keep it light and be fast. They would take their time avoiding these mighty swings from these colossal warriors and then eventually, you know, tire them out. And then when the time was just right, they would toss a net over them and then proceed to poke them as hard and as fast as they could. They would poke the of them. It helps to be quick, but if you've seen Game of Thrones, you know spears don't always work. Kicking off the list at number 10, a really old bird. Yep, I'm kicking this list off with a tiny Chinese bird, a little wooden bird. This figurine is incredibly old. It looks like a wooden Monopoly piece almost. It's tiny. And when I say old, I mean like really old. It was carved 13,000 years ago. To give you an idea of how old that is, the pyramids aren't even 5,000 years old yet. Yep, mind blown. Just hit you with that one. About half an inch tall, small sculptures like these, perching birds to be more specific, were quite common in ancient Chinese art forms from the Neolithic age. Back in 1958 at the Lingjing site in China, a well was dug out. Now the construction crew went about 16 feet down, and unbeknownst to them, the dirt pile that was accumulating held secrets to our history. Inside this pile there were ancient tools, sculptures, broken ceramics. Then cut to 2005, archaeologists at Shandong University found one of the most important piles of dirt in the world. More importantly, they found this tiny little bird. How cute is that? And you could eat this thing, it's that small. Any piece of history that you could eat, that's rare. That's a pretty rare find. It's like finding a diamond, it's so small. Number 9, government sauna sessions. Over in Finland, they're changing the sauna game. The sauna is considered a national institution, and it's a large part of both Finnish and Estonian cultures. These saunas are commonly found surrounding Finland's lakes, corporate headquarters, and the Parliament House. Yeah, those 3 places, that's where you'll find a sauna. Just naked people hanging out. Saturday in Finland is the traditional sauna day. It's not the day for the boys, it's actually the day for the sauna. We're gonna get our towels for this one. I can't even fit into a bathtub. Also, I look like an octopus trying to escape out of a jar. It's not a relaxing Saturday for this guy at all. I would go to Finland, I would do this. When government leaders can't agree on an issue, they take it to the sauna. In the middle of passing a bill, dudes will just be naked, passing out. Finns describe the sauna as a secret weapon behind their diplomatic advances. It's just, hey, you won't believe number 4. Get naked and get hot. Director of the Finnish Employers Confederation described the ritual, saying that it's easier to discuss problems openly. It's like when you were doing a presentation in class and they would say to imagine everybody naked. Well, this was that played out in real life. Take away the briefcase and tie, you're just a naked dude sitting on a bench talking about inflation. Who are we, you know? We're just a bunch of naked people. We all look stupid. Number 8, ancient eye drops. Does anybody else just sneeze every time they look at the sun? Am I allergic to the sun? Is that it? Is that just me? My eyes are always dry. I think I forget to blink sometimes. I have all the screens around me and all these lights, so maybe all day I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on, but today there's a Visine for literally everything in the book. Eye drops are common now, but written in the oldest book of medicine, the Ebers Papyrus, chock full of ancient Egyptian medical recipes, and it contained old ophthalmic treatment. Even in Egyptian artwork, you can find ancient cataract treatments, like just paintings of this. British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard found these clay tablets from ancient Babylonia around 625 BC, and treatment for dry eyes was a little different than today. Today, all we have to do is then you're good. Back then, they would use chemicals from mixed plants with prayers, essentially. So good luck. One ancient tablet described the treatment at the time saying, if a man's eyes are affected with dryness, he shall rub an onion, drink it in beer, and apply oil to his eyes. Like, what is it even, huh? Thou shalt disembowel a yellow frog, mix its gall and curd, and apply to the eyes. I don't even know what that means. Like, imagine reading that on a prescription, know what I mean? It's like, take twice with food. Also, I need a yellow frog? What is this? Why is this a riddle? What is this? Number 7, ancient shampoo. When my hair grew out over the pandemic, I had a huge wake-up call. I don't know how to handle this. I still don't know. I see it in the prompter here, and I'm like, what do I do? Do I put it back? Do I shave it? I don't know. My whole life, all I knew was the classic 4-in-1 shampoo for guys. You know, it's like conditioner, shampoo, mouthwash, whatever, all in one. Doesn't work. I needed shampoo and conditioner, separate things, okay? It takes time to figure out what works with your flow, with your hair flow, but the ancient Romans, they didn't have time. Or Head and Shoulders. They would dip their hair in cold water at a public bathhouse, so also ew, and then they would rub and scrape away oils. Lime water was also used to wash your hair, but that was just as useful as lime wire. Sometimes Europeans wouldn't even use water at all to rinse. They would just rub their head with bran before bed and then brush it out with a comb in the morning. Bran, I would be itching my head all night. That's horrible. I used dog shampoo once by accident when I was younger, and honestly, there's something they're not telling us. I felt too good after. I felt too smooth. I was like, wait a minute, this is way too heavy. Number 6, cursed freckles. Oh, this next one hurts. If you have freckles, I'm sorry, but I have to share. There's some people out there that don't like us, apparently. I love my freckles. Every summer they pop harder, better, faster, and stronger. But back in the day, there were some pretty insane methods to get rid of them. I know, right? How could you? Having freckles in ancient Roman times meant that you couldn't participate in your favorite magical rituals. Sorry, Balthazar, I have freckles, I can't come. Having freckles meant that you were impure or polluted. In ancient Greece, having a beauty mark on your cheek meant that a bright future was in store for you. How lucky, must be nice. Medieval Europe, moles or freckles meant that you were for sure a witch. Not as great, that one's not good at all. Ancient China, if you had a red or black mole, that was a good sign, but a brown mole, that was grave warning signs in there. So depending where and when you were, that freckle that you named when you were 7 could have literally changed your life. In places where freckles weren't desirable, sulfur was used daily to get rid of them. No, we don't recommend lathering your face with sulfur here at all. In fact, I think magical rituals are safer than sulfur, in fact. Number 5, sailors' toilets. Life on the sea wasn't easy in ancient times. Even today, you know how hard it is to take a crap on a boat? Have you ever had to use the washroom on a rocking boat? Like number 2? You have to try and wipe. It's just, I don't know, you're doing this a lot. Whale watching's fun and games until your stomach's like, no, you're done, get out. While it's a rockin' and rollin' way of using the loo, how did sailors do it back in ancient times? Was it easier being far away from the general public, and was it helpful that water was just splashing all over the place? Honestly, not really. If you have to use number 2 out in the sea, that's when a tow rag would come into play. Yeah, anytime the word rag's used, I'm like, ooh, you're not in for a good time, my friend. Near the head of the ship, where the toilet was, or rather just a hole into the ocean, there was a single rope with a rag. When it's not being used, or shared rather, the rag would be tossed over the side of the ship, so it would just wash away all the yuck. It would just wash away all day, which is fine, I think. The sharing is caring thing, not on board for, pun intended. Do you fold, do you scrunch, or do you use barnacle rope? Sound off below. Number 4, really old socks. Somebody got me socks as a gift over the holidays, and I'm not gonna lie to you, couldn't be more thrilled. Still the best gift ever. Socks and lip balm, there's nothing you can't do. That's it, that's all you could ever ask for. Socks in ancient Greece were not light on the left and right feet. No, not at all. There weren't neon green athletic socks that you have today. Nothing like that, not even close. Socks came around in the 8th century BC. They were made fresh from animal hairs. This led to Romans tying animal skins around their feet and then tying those together. Cut to the 2nd century AD in ancient Rome, the sock game started to get real. Romans began using fabrics instead of animal skins. Score, it was softer, lighter, and then later in the 5th century, socks were worn only by the most holy. Excuse me while I put on my holy socks. And not in that way, haha. Holy socks, get it? It's a pun, you got it. Socks were associated with the church. They were considered a symbol of purity. You have freckles and socks on, they're like, I don't know what this guy wants. I don't know, he's giving off mixed messages here. Socks would go all the way up to your leg too, a little different than the Vans ankle socks that I'm currently wearing today with my boots. One of them is half off in my foot right now. I can feel it, it's just sliding just away from me as I'm doing this list. Number 3, King Tut. One of the greatest mysteries is of course the history of the young King Tut. The young boy became pharaoh at just age 9 age 9, he was 9 years old, back in 1332 BC. During his time of ruling, the young king had to face a country in conflict. It wasn't easy at all. Egypt and Nubia were going head to head over land, and not even 10 years into ruling, the young pharaoh died at just age 18. How sad is that? It wasn't until 1922 until he was seen again. Howard Carter discovered the tomb of the lost king appropriately in the Valley of the Kings, and this is where we could have been a bit more careful, historically speaking, when Tut was discovered. They tried to move his body out of the oil that coated the coffin that he was stuck in, but in doing so, they damaged him. They damaged this ancient mummy that we've been looking for literally thousands of years. So now it's next to impossible to tell what really took his life at such an early age, but we have some ideas. That's what I'm here for. It's believed King Tut had a broken leg. After some 3D scans were done, it appears the king wasn't in the best shape prior to his death. Our best guess is that he may have fallen off a chariot, one of the chariots he was buried with. King Tut passed away at age 19, so many believe that his own burial chamber hadn't even been built yet. So instead, they had to use Queen Nefertiti's. A radar survey around the tomb in the Valley of the Kings shows us a hidden chamber behind the north wall of the burial chamber, and we still haven't found her final resting place, but with the aid of technology and 3D scans, we're pretty close. We're finding new stuff every day. We literally found a lost city like a month ago. Number 2, the Great Stink of 1858. Not that ancient, but too good to ignore. You have to hear about this. It's one thing living through a pandemic, but at least we're not living through something called the Great Stink. This one's stinky. The Great Stink of 1858. Who was responsible for this one? Who did it? This was an event in central London, and it lasted for a few months, in the summertime too, which is just, great for great stinks. It was so hot and dry that the Thames dried up, leaving just sewage. All the water dried up and it was just, behold, all of our crap. Literally. The smell was so bad that Parliament had to close for the day. Yeah, I want to know who the first guy was to be like, you know what? I'm going home. He's like, no, I'm not doing this. In order to continue to work, Parliament had to soak the curtains on the riverside in lime chloride, just so they wouldn't be sick. They were on the verge of moving their entire operation to Oxford. That's how bad the smell was. They're like, should we just go away? I don't know, is that easier? While this all sounds horrible, hundreds of tons of limes were being discharged into sewers to help the smell. So if you had a stuffy nose in July of 1858, you could have made 1,500 pounds a week by just throwing limes in sewers. You're like, I can't smell a thing. Ha ha ha, I'm getting rich. And finally, number 1, the first peace treaty. Unusual at the time? Absolutely. The first peace treaty in history was back in 1271 BC. Now at this point, Egyptians and the Hittite Empire were fighting over modern day Syria, and this conflict had been lasting centuries, but finally, come 1274 BC, the Battle of Kadesh was underway. Tons of bloodshed, no clear victor in sight, so now what's left to do at this point? Well, the first ever official peace treaty. That's what we do. Ramses II and King Hattusili III both negotiated a peace treaty where both sides would aid each other if a third party decided to get involved in the near future. A copy of the treaty can currently be found in New York above the entrance to the United Nations Security Council chamber, and it's also in the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest peace treaty ever, so that's how you know it's official.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the mushroom of immortality. As early as 475 BCE, there are written records that reference the mushroom of immortality, which was the key ingredient in the elixir of life. The lingzi, which is translated to mean supernatural mushroom, is the oldest known mushroom to be used medically, which is super cool. According to the Book of Han, people who were masters of esoterica, alchemists, and magicians, known as the Fang Shi, knew the secret locations on Mount Penglai where these immortality mushrooms grew, but no one else did. This resulted in several Qin and Han emperors who sent large expeditions to search for the mushrooms of immortality, but to no avail. While these mushrooms are still used in traditional Chinese medicine today, it doesn't seem as though anyone has been able to actually achieve immortality from them, but maybe we just don't have the correct recipe anymore.
Number 9. Dark Ages Tomb. Looking back to the Dark Ages in Shamir Heights, northern Israel, this tomb is massive. It's made up of 400 tons of boulders and stretches to about 65 feet wide. This burial chamber goes back to 4,000 years ago. It could mean that humans were part of an organized society that long ago, especially consider the art that they found on the ceiling inside the dolmen. Check this out. This is the first time art has been documented in one of these chambers in the Middle East, and we haven't quite figured out what the ceiling carvings depict yet. So far we think arrows or anchors of some sort, but inside the actual grave there were 3 sets of human remains found as well, so it had been used for quite some time. While excavating the ancient grave site, archaeologists also found colored beads. One of the most intriguing parts of this grave has to be the lines carved onto the ceilings. All these lines connecting to one arc. What does it mean? Any thoughts? Put them down below. Number 8. The fall of the Roman Republic. Okay, looking back to 44 BC, we thought Julius Caesar getting assassinated was a major factor for the Roman Republic's downfall. Well, you know what's even more dangerous than a bunch of dudes running at Julius Caesar? A volcano. Yeah, it's a bit louder too. Thanks to science, we think the main villain in this story came from 6,000 miles away. About a year before Caesar's death, the Omak volcano went off on an island near Alaska. Now the ash cloud that drifted over afterwards, they were such a big deal, and we believe that it caused Rome's social downfall. We look at Arctic ice samples like we do with tree rings. We can literally see layers of history. So we compared the volcanic material to rocks surrounding the volcanoes, and we connect the dots. Bob's your uncle. Sorry, Julius Caesar. We thought you were kind of cooler. I don't know. You're still pretty cool. Number 7, a really old cat. We've covered the Nazca lines here on this channel before, but have you heard about this relaxing fat boy? The Nazca Desert in Peru was already fascinating with its geoglyphs, but among the 2,000-year-old massive pieces of ancient art, we had this massive cat that predates the Nazca lines. See, the cat was from the late Paracas era around 500 BC, whereas the lines were from the Nazca culture around 700 AD. It's about 37 meters long, it's big, and we caught it last year at a pretty good time. It was actually really close to fading away thanks to natural erosion, and now the fat cat has since been conserved. Let's go pet it. Let's go pet this giant cat on this big hill. Imagine seeing that, I'd be like, oh, great joke, guys. No, it's a real thing from thousands of years old. No idea why. Number 6, Forrest Fenn's treasure. Somebody called Nicolas Cage. We found treasure. We did it. And by we, I mean the 33-year-old Michigan medical student Jack Stueff. Back in 2010, to fill you in a bit, millionaire Forrest Fenn kicked off a literal treasure hunt. He said he'd hidden $1 million worth of treasure in the Rocky Mountains somewhere, and the only clue as to where it lays was a 24-line poem. Yeah, like it's Zelda Breath of the Wild. How exciting is that? This treasure brought in thousands of hunters, obviously, 5 of which lost their lives trying to find this thing. It was a big deal. Jack only found out about this treasure hunt in 2018, so he was late to the party, yet still he found it. Interesting. Obviously, there's no details as to where it was found. Jack remained anonymous for quite some time, because there were legal battles, there were court dates, and honestly, I'd love to see a movie about this whole thing and how it went down. Show us the story of Forrest Fenn's hidden treasure hunt. Add a little Hans Zimmer in the background. Debit. I'll go see that movie twice. Number 5, Ice Age art. More ancient artwork, this time from the Colombian Amazon. Thing is, unlike other drawings found on the ceilings of tombs, this canvas stretches about 8 miles. The paintings are even more impressive than that. Dating back to 12,000 years ago, these drawings were made near the end of the last ice age. Thousands of paintings, by the way, not just a handful of arrows either. A lot. These were found in 2017, but it was only last year when they went public with their findings. Those findings being paintings of elephants, massive sloths, horses from the Ice Age, snakes, birds, and deer. This is now one of the largest collections of rock art in South America. Pregnant women or the origins of the Ninja Turtles. Number 4, more mummies. Summer 2020. While most of the world was stuck inside watching Netflix, more than 100 sealed coffins were found. And yes, they're occupied. Found of course in Saqqara, Egypt, Egyptian archaeologists have never been more excited. And honestly, I'm pretty jazzed too. Maybe we'll find the body of Cleopatra. Wouldn't that just be dandy? The fact that we found over 100 of these still in great shape is mind-blowing, because grave robbers have been around since ancient Egyptian days, and for all of those to be untouched for this long, crazy. The findings date back to 712 BC, which was a period where Egypt was controlled by foreign civilizations, like Persians and Greeks, and the idea that we're finding mummies is great and all, but I've seen too many Brendan Fraser classics to not be a little concerned at the same time. Please don't open them. I don't know, just leave them. We don't really need to know. Do we? We opened a sarcophagus and like this ooze came out, and now coronavirus is a thing. I'm just saying, do the math. You just check out. Number 3, an ancient zoo. Many moons before the pyramids were even built, Egyptians were visiting petting zoos. 6,000 years ago, Heracleopolis was a booming town, sitting alongside the Nile River. In Mike Tyson fashion, you would flaunt your wealth by getting an exotic animal as a pet. Yeah, as a pet is very important here. There were excavations done back in the late 19th century by English archaeologists James Quibble and Frederick Green. They were the ones who discovered that this town was thriving with over 10,000 residents, but when further studies were performed, we also discovered the remains of elephants, baboons, and a hippo, right next to the remain of their owner. Of course, what a weird funeral. These archaeologists found remains of baboons surrounding humans. I can only imagine their first thought upon finding this. We found a body next to a hippo. Is this a crime scene or an unbreakable bond? Animals are cute, you know, even if they're hippos that can eat your head. Still nice. Number 2, Ötzi the Iceman. Discovered in September 1991, this mummy was found on the border of Austria and Italy. He's Europe's oldest known and natural mummy. He was covered in ice shortly after his death, so most of the 45-year-old man from the Copper Age was left in rather good condition. I say that, I mean he's a literal corpse, like bones, but it was good condition for a mummy. A 5,000-year-old man was found in ice. Take that, Captain America, eat that. Before he died in the Italian Alps, Ötzi had a number of health problems. He had arthritis, Lyme disease, and he was lactose intolerant, which I think is the worst of all. Thanks to science, we know that Ötzi the Iceman was sharpening his tools right before his death. It's almost like he had a hunch that he was about to be brutally killed. Sorry, Ötzi. Number 1, the origins of spirituality. Cave drawings go back thousands of years. We're still trying to find the origins of spirituality in a sense. You know, these gods are appearing in all these religions, these half human, half animal hieroglyphs are popping up. We've recently found a cave painting going back 44,000 years ago. That's making us rethink Neanderthals and their ability to create spiritual drawings. Now, a team from Griffith University found this painting in an Indonesian cave in the island of Sulawesi. Again, these half human figures appearing ages ago. This is kind of creepy. This predates the old paintings found in Europe. They were thinking of creatures, these spiritual theanthropes, long before others, meaning that this could be the first example of culture and spirituality ever to exist. Thousands of years from now, archaeologists are going to find this abandoned tunnel in the middle of nowhere, and then right on the ceiling it will say, "James was here," and Sharpie. That'll be the next version of this in millions of years. Art is art, even if it's, you know, someone drawing something in a bathroom stall or someone drawing something in a cave 45,000 years ago. I kind of like the latter a bit more.